Keith Urban, a name that once lit up every stage it touched, a voice that could melt through the hardest heart, a man who turned pain into poetry and struggle into sound. But at 57, behind that signature smile and the glimmer of the spotlight, lies a tragedy so raw, so heartbreakingly human. It reminds us that even the brightest stars can carry the heaviest shadows. The crowd roars, the lights flare, and for a moment, everything feels eternal. His hands glide over the guitar strings like a whisper to heaven, his voice trembling through every lyric, each word carrying a lifetime of unspoken stories. But deep within him, there's a flicker, something fragile, something fading. "You okay, mate?" a stagehand once asked softly, just as the curtain rose. Keith smiled that same boyish smile, the one the world fell in love with. "Yeah, I'm good. Always good," he said. But those who looked close enough saw the truth hiding behind his eyes, the exhaustion of years, the weight of memories he never escaped, the haunting thought that maybe, just maybe, the music was all he had left to keep him standing. He remembered the boy he once was, a kid from Whangarei, New Zealand, barefoot, wide-eyed, holding a cheap guitar, dreaming of Nashville skies. He remembered his father's rough hands, guiding his tiny fingers across the strings, his mother's soft voice telling him, "One day, the world will know your name." And they did. The world did. But they didn't know what it cost him. "Sometimes," he whispered once in an interview years later, his voice cracking between words, "you chase the dream so far, you forget what home feels like." Fame, success, applause, it all looked perfect from the outside. But when the lights went out and the cheers faded, the silence was deafening. He'd sit alone in his dressing room, a towel around his neck, his hands trembling slightly. Not from nerves, but from the ache that fame never healed. "I remember the first night I played a sold-out show," he once said. "I thought I'd made it. I thought this was happiness. But then I walked off stage and it felt empty. Like I left a piece of me out there that I could never get back." He tried to fill that emptiness with work, with music, with love, but the deeper he dove into the spotlight, the darker it got. There were moments when he'd stare at his reflection in the mirror, searching for that boy who used to dream, and all he saw was a man fighting to hold on. "You've got this, Keith," he'd whisper to himself before walking on stage, even when he wasn't sure he did. Those who knew him best could feel it. The heaviness he carried behind the laughter, the sadness in his songs that felt too real to be just art. "He plays like he's bleeding through the guitar," one friend said once. "You can hear his soul crack open with every note." And yet, that's what made him who he was. Keith Urban wasn't just a singer. He was a survivor of his own story. A man who faced demons that the world could never see. Addiction, loneliness, the brutal pressure of always being perfect. "Music saved me more than once," he confessed once on stage, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every time I thought I was done, the music pulled me back." There were nights he'd play until his fingers bled, the stage lights blurring as tears mixed with sweat. The audience unaware that they were witnessing not just a performance, but a confession. Each song was a chapter of his pain disguised as melody, each lyric a cry for peace. "I used to think the hardest part was making it," he said. "But it's not. It's staying whole when everyone wants a piece of you." He'd look out at the crowd, thousands of faces glowing under the light, and yet, somehow, he'd never felt more alone. And yet, In that loneliness, he found purpose. He began to write not for the fame, but for the broken souls who found healing in his voice. The ones who needed to know they weren't alone either. "If you're hurting tonight," he said one night during a concert, pausing mid-song, "just know I've been there too. Don't give up on your light. It's still in you, even when you can't see it." The crowd went silent, thousands holding their breath. Then, slowly, the applause came. Not the kind that celebrates, but the kind that understands. Somewhere in the front row, a woman wiped away tears. Somewhere in the back, a kid whispered, "That's me." But even as he gave hope to others, Keith's body was beginning to give him warning signs. Tiredness that wouldn't fade, late-night dizziness, the subtle signs of a man who'd been running too hard for too long. His team begged him to rest, but he couldn't. "If I stop," he said quietly one night, "I don't know who I am anymore." There was a night, somewhere on tour, when everything caught up to him. Backstage, after the encore, he collapsed against the wall, clutching his chest, gasping. Panic erupted. "Get him some air!" someone shouted. "Keith, stay with us!" But even then, as he blinked through the haze, he whispered, "Don't cancel the show tomorrow." They came to hear the music. That's who he was. Heartbreaking, selfless, a man who gave everything to the stage, even when it drained the last bit of his strength. Later, sitting in the quiet of a hotel room, he looked out over the city lights and said softly, "Maybe the tragedy isn't in falling apart. Maybe it's in pretending you're okay when you're not." He sipped from a glass of water, his hands shaking slightly, the reflection of neon flickering across his face. "But maybe," he added with a faint smile, "that's how you learn to heal. Piece by piece." And somehow, he did. Through the pain, the mistakes, the near collapses, he learned to stand again, not because he had to, but because people needed his light. "I'm still here," he told a friend once, "because someone out there still needs a song." And so he sang. Through the tremors, through the tears, through the quiet battles the world would never know. Every note he played became a prayer for those who couldn't find their voice. Every smile, a reminder that even broken hearts can still shine. The tragedy of Keith Urban wasn't just the pain he endured, it was the beauty he created from it. The courage to face the darkness and still choose to sing. He looked out one night at the crowd, the lights soft and golden, and whispered under his breath, "This is what living looks like." The music swelled, the band rose, and Keith closed his eyes, lost in the sound. He wasn't escaping anymore. He was finally free. But destiny had more to say. Because as he turned 57, the world began to notice something different. A slowing pace, a quieter tone, a man who seemed to be saying goodbye without ever using the words. Fans began to worry. "Is he okay?" they asked online. "He looks tired. He sounds sad." And yet, Keith never said a word. He just kept playing, smiling, showing up. "If I can leave one thing behind," he said softly in a backstage video, "let it be love. Not fame. Just love." And in that moment, it was clear. This wasn't an ending. It was a legacy. The lights dimmed, the camera faded, and as the crowd's applause echoed like a heartbeat, Keith Urban stood tall, guitar in hand, a man who had turned every tragedy into art. He took a slow breath, eyes shimmering under the spotlight, and whispered one last line before walking off stage. "If my story touched you tonight, honor it. Honor me by keeping the music alive. Subscribe, follow. Remember, and never stop believing in your own song. "You gave them everything," a crew member said softly. Keith nodded. "They gave it back." He walked toward the exit, the sound of his boots on the concrete like a slow metronome, thinking about all the years that had led him here, every mistake, every victory, every sleepless night chasing perfection that never existed. He thought about the faces he'd met, the ones who told him his music helped them survive their darkest days, and he realized that maybe that was the point of it all. Not to be perfect, but to be real. Later, sitting in his small home studio, the room lit only by the blue glow of the mixing board, he strummed the first few chords of a new song. The melody was simple, almost fragile, like it could fall apart if he breathed too hard. "Don't let it fade," he murmured, closing his eyes. And in that instant, he wasn't chasing charts or fame. He was chasing truth. The lyrics came slowly, one by one, each line a reflection of everything he'd learned. "If the road ends here, let it end in grace. Let the sound of love be my last embrace." He smiled as he wrote it, the kind of smile that comes when pain finally makes sense. He paused, set down his guitar, and looked at the photographs on the wall, old tour posters, friends long gone, cities that felt like dreams. "We spend half our lives trying to be seen," he said softly, "and the other half learning how to be remembered." He reached for a notebook filled with unfinished lyrics and scribbled in the margin, "Legacy is not about how loud they cheer, but how long they feel it after you're gone." The clock ticked. The night deepened, and Keith thought about the cost of art. The sleepless nights, the missed dinners, the loneliness behind the curtain. Yet even with all of that, he wouldn't trade it. "This is who I am," he said to the empty room, "a man who speaks in songs." He laughed quietly, strummed a chord, and let the sound fade into the dark. Sometimes he'd imagine himself years from now, sitting on a porch somewhere quiet, the world moving on, and he'd wonder if people would still listen, still hum his tunes while driving down long, empty roads. That thought didn't sadden him, it humbled him. "If the songs outlive me," he said, "then maybe I did something right." He remembered the faces in the crowd, the children on their parents' shoulders singing along, the strangers who became a chorus, and he felt a swell of gratitude so pure, it almost hurt. Now that's the end. Subscribe for more videos.